Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Alessia Calafiore, and I'm about to, I want to talk to you about an ongoing project I'm working on aimed at measuring beauty in urban settings. I'm researcher at the Geographic Data Science Lab at the University of Liverpool. I want to start by highlighting why I think that we do need a measurable notion of urban beauty. So the concept of beauty is commonly associated with personal tastes, and even in philosophy, there are contrasting views defining beauty as an objective or subjective concept. Now, it's definitely out of the scope of my project to enter this kind of debate. So essentially started by considering beauty, referring to the etymological meaning of the word, which is something well done. So applying this meaning to urban environment, I've been trying to translate what are recognized as best practices in urban planning into a measurable concept. So the reason why I believe that it's important to have a measurable notion of urban beauty is, on the one hand, to help address, to support planners in addressing a development that brings about transformation that comply with those that are recognized as best practices in urban planning, but on the other hand, also to give citizens a tool to make decision maker more accountable in terms of the impact that certain development have had on the urban environment. So just to give a bit of the current context in the UK, there's been a recent report titled Living with Beauty by the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission that has been appointed by the Ministry of Housing, where actually the idea of building more beautiful, to bring about more beautiful kind of development is stressed, and it's nice to see within this report that the notion of beauty is not merely associated with aesthetic aspects, but also with a more general idea of the quality of place. But it lacks of a clear definition of beauty, and that actually might be, this vagueness might be a bit dangerous, particularly when they try to advise for a fast track for beauty. So giving too much space for subjective decision on what is beautiful and what is not, it just makes every kind of decision a bit less accountable. So I think that it would be important to clarify what is the meaning of urban beauty to try and give more space to those planning applications that pursue beauty. And on the other hand, we've recently heard from Boris Johnson the wish to build. So the idea of a New Deal focused on investments on new infrastructure and development. So we might be seeing more transformation in the near future, which would be good to be able to assess. Then going into the definition that I developed of urban beauty in this project. So this is, as I said, is an ongoing project. There are still improvement that I want to add on top of this, but the initial idea is to focus on these 4 domains or dimensions, as you prefer. So one is walkability. Walkability is broadly recognized as an important element of the urban environment for improving the quality of life. Nowadays, we're kind of understanding even more we're learning even more to appreciate walkability in cities and having space for people to move around. And the idea of walkability is a quite holistic one. So looking at studies try to define walkability, the most common elements that are accounted for are the idea of a lively environment. So even thinking at the Jane Jacobs' idea of vitality. So it's important to have a significant presence of amenities, and also population density is important in this. And compactness, it's another element often mentioned while talking about walkability. In this study, I've been using dwelling density to measure compactness and connectivity. A very common measure for connectivity is to look at the intersection density. Although I believe there's space for improvement to actually have a more comprehensive evaluation of connectivity. So another domain is that of size and sense of order. So it's widely mentioned that the 3 to 5 story buildings are those that might fit better what can be called as the human scale. There are actually studies showing that that building height might also simulate more positive, might trigger positive feelings because of the sense of enclosure that it gives. And so I've been including the heights of building in the definition of beauty as well. On the opposite side, you have there are studies showing that sharp differences in building heights might trigger stress or negative feelings, particularly because it gives a sense of chaos. And so also this kind of differences are accounted in the definition of urban beauty that I'm trying to develop. Then you have greenness. I think it's useless to list all the benefits of having green spaces around. There's plenty of study demonstrated this. Plus, it's also an important. It's also quite relevant in terms of the air pollution and a more sustainable environment to live in. For greenness, I've been accounting for public parks only, so I'm interested into public green space, not only private, not private. So green space that is accessible to all. And then I've also been using data on trees, mostly maintained trees by the local authority. So it doesn't account for all green, for all trees in cities, in urban settings, but only those that are maintained by the local authority. And then the historical character. well, concerning the historical character, I just want to clarify that it's not just about listed buildings, which is actually the only kind of data that I was able to use. So it's the only element listed here. But the idea of the historical character is to have to live in an environment that is harmonic in terms of the style. So it's listed buildings, but might even be more newer buildings that actually reflect, maintain certain features that are characteristics of historical buildings. And this is not just to preserve the historical heritage, which is incredibly important, but it's also about the spillovers that the historical that the cultural heritage has in terms of sense of well, in terms of the identity and uniqueness of place. So maintaining the historical character of a certain area, it actually what makes a place more recognizable and I would say unique. So the method to develop the score. About this, I need to say at first that this analysis is based on LSUA level geography. Now there are some related studies looking at assessing streets rather than streets for measuring beauty or walkability. In this case, I focus on LSUA level, at the LSUA level. Well, first because I think that it's important to account for context around streets. So it should be the right level of granularity to maintain a bit of the context surrounding certain certain streets, and also because the availability of data. So there's a much higher availability of data at level, also to eventually to further analysis. Associating the score with other variables. So there are some advantages of using LSUA geography, although other scale might be considered in the future. But for now, I prefer to focus on LSUA as a preliminary outcome. So then essentially the method starts with a variable selection focused to aimed at matching the definition of urban beauty that I've just mentioned to you, and then some pre-processing, essentially among all the LSUA, only areas that have less than 70% covered by green space are considered. So those LSUA that are mostly parks are discarded because there's not enough built built environment to actually calculate the score, and also those that have less than 10 inhabitants per hectare. So this is mostly industrial areas or airports. So the variables then standardized and transformed to standardized by ranking and then transformed into a standard normal distribution. And then for each domain, I wanted to obtain a factor score essentially. So I calculated the weights through factor analysis for all the domains. The only domain where I employed subjective weights is that of size and sense of order, just because from factor analysis it seemed to give very much relevance to symmetry, which is something that should be probably adjusted in other ways as well. But the problem is that it's still a bit ambiguous, the role of symmetry, because on the one hand, if you have sharp differences, you have negative outcomes, sharp differences in building heights. But also a complete symmetry might actually be perceived as boring in the urban landscape. So at the moment, the only way I implemented to relax a bit this criterion is to give less weight to that specific variable. And then once I obtained the factor scores, I summed that then I summed the weighted variables to obtain a factor score for each domain. So each of these domains are then normalized by using the exponentially normalized rank function that is implemented in a multiple dimensional index. This function works very well, but the only thing is that it's for the way it is defined, it's more sensitive towards higher values. So also in my case, I have a more sensitivity towards beauty rather than, let's say, ugliness, although this is more focused on measuring positive elements of the pigment. And then each of these resulting score, well, the resulting score for each domain are again combined by weighting the variables, by weighting the factor score with objective weights, so through factor analysis and then sum again. So the data I've been using, so I experimented this approach on data for Greater London. I will mention afterwards that the idea is that of scale this to at the national level, but Greater London has more data essentially, so there's higher data availability. So I started with applying this method on Greater London, and this is the data that I've been using. So for the workability, as I said, population density based on 2018 estimates and number of dwellings to identify area with amenities. I've been using CDRC, the CDRC retail centers boundary, and develop a retail score that is essentially based on the area of the retail center. So it ranges 1 to 4, which is the quartiles of the distribution of all areas of this retail center boundaries. So when an LSA intersects or is near to a retail center, it gets this score that can range from 1 to 4. And then for the intersection density, I've been using the OS road dataset. For the size and sense of order, I use the OS master map building heights attribute that is also available. For the symmetry, I've been using the standard deviation at LSA level in building heights. For the size, I actually use the mean of building height, the building heights mean, but I use the difference between 12 meters, which is more or less the best height for well, the high of a 4-story building, 3 to 4-story building, and then so I use the difference of between 12 and the mean building heights, the absolute value of this difference to actually assess to what extent the mean building size is close to the optimal, let's say, building heights. And then for the historical character, I took the proportion of listed buildings. And finally, for greenness, I calculated the public park score the same way of the retail score, so based on the area of the park, and then calculated the tree density. So these are some preliminary results on Greater London. Actually, what it's very clear is a central area to suburban divide. Although with this score, I'm able to pick the high street, or well, more historical centers of the local authorities composing Greater London, also in peripheral areas. The weights that have been obtained through factor analysis right now for each domain are those that you can see in the table. These weights can be changed into more subjective weights based on the load you want to give to each dimension, the weight you want to have for each dimension to the final score. At the minute, I've been using the one emerging from factor analysis. So just picking, from the picture, you can see there are some figures. So I've been just starting a preliminary assessment of this initial outcome by looking at the higher and lower values of each domain. And I mean, for workability, these are just a few examples, but those that are classified as those that obtain higher score seems to have more dense environment and with more amenities, while essentially those with lower score are more desolated places.
And this moment, Alessia, just to let you know.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm almost here. So yeah, this is just a few screenshots that are also available on the extended abstract. Actually, the only thing I want to, yeah, the only thing I want to highlight here for the historical character, I'm actually not very happy with the score because of the limits with the listed buildings I was mentioning before. So as you can see at the bottom, you have higher, well, the highest score in historical character, and it picks clearly area that have a higher number of listed building. But if you look at the top, on the top left, it's clearly a new, well, it's clearly new development with styles that are more related to contemporary style. While on the right hand, you still can see features that are more characteristic of the historical buildings. So there's a limit in the way to capture the historical character right now, and I'm already planning to expand on that. So this brings me to future works and possible applications. So there are a few things that I'm already implementing now. At first, the use of a weighted distance to nearest park retail center rather than the score that I've been using now. And then the plan is that of extending the score to the main UK cities. But also, I would like to include more computer vision techniques to this work. So I'm starting collecting Street View images, although it's not very easy to access that kind of data. But to first assess the historical character going beyond listed buildings, so training a classifier to identify buildings that have historical, well, feature of historical buildings. And I'm also planning to employ this kind of Street View images for validation. Some related studies have been using data coming from crowdsourcing to define beauty. The limit of that, although it's very useful kind of measure, but the limit is that of representativeness. So I'm trying to go the other way around, essentially. So start from an expert definition of beauty and then going through validation, possibly including a, well, asking for the view of a representative sample of the population in order to validate the expert definition of urban beauty. And well, one of the possible application of this is in the context of this idea of a fast track for beauty. This can be a useful tool to assess, to have an objective, for say, assessment, or more than objective, I would say, defined and clear assessment of the impact of a possible new planning application. So sorry if I'm a bit late. Thanks for listening. I'll be happy to answer any questions now, but feel free to get in touch for even just for feedback. So I'll be happy to get that.
That was wonderful, Alessia. Thank you very much. So if we could hold on the applause for a moment. We are a little over there, so I think we can afford probably one brief question. So if anyone has a question they'd like to ask, please drop it into the chat window. Okay, so we'll do first off the trigger. So the first question is Joanna Stewart. That says, I'm really interested in learning a bit more about how you calculated walkability. Could you say a bit more about that? Just very briefly, please, Alessia.
Yeah. So walkability essentially is a combination of the lively environment, so amenities. So essentially use the presence of retail centers in, on, or around the LSUA, and then population density, dwelling density, and the intersection density. So these are the main variables that I extracted for calculating walkability. On the abstract, you can find a table where I list all the variable and the dataset where I found that I used to calculate the score, final score.